So, hello and welcome to A Long Walk, Walking with the Children of Israel. This is part one preparation. I am Zakiya Monique, Master Relationship Strategist, Transformational Speaker, Bestselling Author of Killer Connections, and I am here with us starting a whole new series. I'm excited about this series, and I want to prompt you to understand that we'll be doing things a little bit differently with this season, with this series, because there are 7 parts, unless the Lord adds more. And I will be giving you the homework, meaning that you'll be preparing for the next week's teaching. So I want you to be prepared for the next week's teaching, which means that this week will be a 2-part teaching. Okay. So we'll be doing some background. Y'all know I'm a teacher by nature, so I don't like to assume that anybody knows anything. And I also like to teach background because it helps you to connect some things. I really believe that when it comes to this teaching, God really wants to emphasize the parallel between the children of Israel and what some of the things that are going on now, right? Because some of the things that are going on now rooted back then. It goes all the way back to that time. But in addition to that, and if we're not careful, the blood of Jesus goes unused. It goes because we just still are connected to the things back then and we haven't broken them. That's what I mean. So we're going to look at it from that perspective. But one of the things that I really am excited about talking about is understanding Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and how they fold into this. Because a lot of times when we hear or when we have heard our grandparents or we've heard people at the church talk about he's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we don't understand what they're really saying, right? I'll speak for me. It didn't really have a lot of position and promise in my life. I didn't really grasp it until I understood what that meant, until I understood the promises that he made to them, until I understood how that affected my life. Like, somebody can tell you something and you'll just kind of be like, yeah, until you know how it impacts you. And so until I understood how God being the same God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob impacted me and how what that really meant, that's when I was like, whoa, this is a whole lot different than what I thought. So this series will absolutely talk about that, and we will really delve into that in this part of the preparation. But again, this will be a short synopsis to kind of just help you understand how it all connects, and then I'll charge you with reading the remainder of the portion, part one's allocated scriptures, so that we're ready for next week, Lord's will, to be able to move forward into next part. So I'll always try to help you be ready for the next part so that when I'm teaching it, it connects better, right? In church, oftentimes they don't tell you what they're going to preach about, right? So when they're preaching about it, you get it, you grasp it, but not like you would if they actually gave you the scriptures and said, be ready for next week. I like it when you're ready for next week because then we can have dialogue. We can, you can tell me sometimes the way that you may have seen it. And so I am not challenged by that. I love it. I love it because then we can really discuss it as opposed to me teaching on it and then you have to go back and read it and then you come back and then I'm teaching on something else. So this will be a little bit different in the way that we will partake in this. Part one will cover, I'll tell you the scriptures now. Part one is preparation, and preparation will cover Exodus 1 all the way through Exodus 5. So we'll stop at 4, Exodus, the end of chapter 4. So we're going to cover Exodus 1 through 4 in preparation. Okay, in preparation. And we're going to but we're also going to delve back today into, as part of preparation, because in order for you to prepare, you got to know what you are preparing for and where did it come from and all of that. So that's what we're going to cover today. So we're going to cover Genesis. See, a lot of times when we're listening for and we're talking about the children of Israel, if you ask a person, okay, tell me what you know about the children of Israel, they'll immediately say go to Exodus. But you can't start at Exodus because a lot of what you confront in the beginning of it will make you go backwards. So you got to go all the way back to Genesis 12, which is where all of this really derived, right? So we're going to go all the way back to Genesis 12, bring you all the way back up to Exodus, half of it, and then the other half you're going to read and be prepared for next week. Okay, so I just kind of wanted to, give you the short version of where we are with everything and what we're going to be doing, because I want you to participate and really be able to discuss. Okay, so um let's get started. A long walk. I really like the title, right? I thought about Jill Scott, like, a long walk, walking with the children of Israel, because it has long been said that the children of Israel turned on what could have been 11 days into 40 years. That's a long walk, right? It's a long time to be trying to get to the promised land, which was the whole point. So, how do we go from an 11-day journey to a 40-year wilderness experience to get to the promised land? That's what we're going to be walking along with them to see. Okay. So let us go and get started. Of course, you know my scriptures. I just told you the main scriptures for the preparation portion of the series is Exodus 1 through 4. However, we will be delving into Genesis 12, 15, 26, 27, 35, and then Genesis 37 through 50 really just kind of chronicles where the Israel's children came from, right? So when we look at Genesis 37 through 50, that's where the children of Israel actually start and they blossom, because the children of Israel are just the children of Jacob, okay, which are the seeds of Isaac, which are the seeds of Abraham. So you see how all of this kind of goes together. So these are the scriptures that we'll be talking about today. And then Exodus 1, chapter 1 through chapter 4, we'll be talking about for the next 2 weeks, Lord's will. Okay. So first and foremost, y'all know I'm a teacher, so we're going into definition. So I want to talk about promise, because the entire journey for the children of Israel was all predicated on or driven by a promise. This was all because God had made a promise. Okay, He made a promise, and He was like, "And I'm keeping my promise." And so as a result, the children of Israel were, went through this whole big thing, and He had to go get Moses. And I mean, it was just so much. Why? Because He made a promise. And so we need to define and keep the mindset of what a promise is as we go through this entire journey, because it really goes back to a promise and how important promises are to God. Okay, so let's talk about the definition of promise. A promise is a declaration or a assurance that one will do a particular thing, or that a particular thing will happen. That's as a noun. As a verb, when you promise, you assure someone that you will definitely do, give, or arrange something. You will undertake or declare that something will happen. It gives good grounds for expecting a particular occurrence or a situation. Okay. Notice that in the second definition, undertaking or assurance given to indulge in or refrain from some specific form of activity. Notice the one word that's in common between the two: assurance. Assurance. Okay, blessed assurance. Right? We heard that song when we were coming up. Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. That means it's a promise. Okay. And now the characteristics of a promise is a promise can be written or oral, it can be temporary in nature, or it can be binding for the indefinite future. It can be made between groups of people, or it can be made one-to-one. It can be sealed by a gesture like handshakes, oaths, or it got, signature with witnesses and legalities involved. So it can be, promises are it just really kind of depends, right? It really kind of depends. And so understand, here are the promises that this long walk, this long journey to the promised land were based on. Because remember, the only reason why it's called the promised land is because of the promises that were made, right? See, a lot of times we don't really connect this stuff. And that's why it was important to me to do this synopsis, so that we would have a good foundation as we moved into walking with the children of Israel. And so here are the three major promises. Here are the three major things that happen that have caused us to hear about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, even in the New Testament over in Hebrew. Even, all throughout when they were dead and gone and all of that, we still hear the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. These three promises. Okay. like the story of Jesus, the story of the children of Israel started back in Genesis chapter 12, verse 2, when God promised Abraham that he would make him, well, he was Abram at the time. He hadn't changed his name yet, but he would make him a great nation. That was the nation of Israel. He would make him a great nation. And the amazing thing is that at the time that he made him this promise, Abram didn't even have any kids. He didn't have any children. There was no Isaac at the time. There was not even any Ishmael at the time. So at that time, when he gave the promise, Abram didn't even have children of his own. But you telling me that I'm going to be the nation, I'm going to be the father of many nations, I'm going to be a great nation, you're going to make my name great. You telling me all this? I don't even see it. Oftentimes when God comes and makes that promise to us, we won't see it. It will look real desolate and bleak, meaning we're looking around like, yeah, so I heard what you said. When you told me I was going to have a husband, I heard what you said, but it's real cold up in here by myself. You know, I heard what you said when you said that I was going to be prosperous, but I'm looking at my bank account and it's looking a little light. I heard what you said when you said that I was going to do this and I was going to do that and I was going to be this and I was going to be that and I was going to have this and I was going to have that and I was going to walk with you in this way and I was all that, because it's not always about material things. Some of the best and greatest promises have nothing to do with material things, but I heard what you said, God, but I'm looking at what I see. And this is why oftentimes we have to remember that things happen, first of all, in the spiritual realm before they happen naturally. I had to learn that, and it's still hard. It's still hard to even comprehend that and to understand that the reason why we do the fasting and the praying is to pull the thing down from the spiritual realm. Do I have evidence of this? Absolutely. Because remember when Daniel was praying over in Daniel, I don't have the chapter right now. I can definitely give it to you later. But when Daniel was praying and the angel came and told him, hey, listen, we heard you the first day you prayed, but it was held up. Held up where? In the spiritual realm. Right? So things happen spiritually before they happen naturally, right? Which is why we also, on the flip side, can stop some things from happening spiritually, from happening naturally, if we catch it spiritually in the beginning. So when God gives us prophetic words, we can pray, we can fast, we can turn from our wicked ways. And sometimes those things will turn as well, meaning that they will never come out of the spiritual realm. They will never manifest physically. But there are some things that we have to do for that to occur. You want a Bible for that too. Remember when he told Hezekiah he was going to die, and Hezekiah turned his back and said, no, God, because I've been good. I've been good to you. And he gave Hezekiah more time because of the prayer. Okay? So ultimately, we have to understand that there were times over in Joel when he would say, I'm going to destroy, but because the people turned. He sent Jonah to Nineveh to tell them, cut it out. So when the people turn, if he sends a prophet, if he sends somebody to tell you to cut it out and you turn, then he may very well turn the destruction as well. Okay? And so, like the story of Jesus, the story of the children of Israel started way back before Israel was even born. Okay? So in chapter 12 and 2, God told Abram, I'll make you a great nation. I'll make your name great. He said all this stuff, but I want you to get up and I want you to leave and go to a place that I'll show you. He didn't even tell him where he was going. And I want us to understand that oftentimes the promise comes with very specific instructions. God is a conditional God. If you, then I. So he says you can have the promise, but this is how you have to get it. God always gives us some level of instruction. That doesn't mean that we got to jump through hoops and we got to labor for the promise. That's not necessarily it all the time. Sometimes there is a cost, but there will always be some level of instruction for us to get the promise, because we can't get the promise doing the things that we want to do in our flesh. No, we can't. Okay? And so, as I said, Abram didn't even have his own kids at the time. He didn't even have his own children at the time, but God had told him, hey, you're going to be the father of many nations. I mean, many nations will come from you. And he's looking at him like, right, okay, well, I'm going to get up and do what you said now. I'm going to get up and leave. And so notice that in the definition of promise that we talked about, it says that there is an assurance that one will do a previous or particular thing. That a particular thing will happen, and it can be remember I told you it can be for the indefinite future as well, because guess what? That promise that he made to Abram is still being fulfilled today. In some way, we're all connected back to who? Abram. And I think with how many billion people on this earth, I like to think that he is the father of many nations today. Okay. So that whole journey was based on God keeping his promise to those who are not even in the land of the living at the time, but he's still fulfilling the promise. Okay, so to give you the specific reading, God made the promise first. The original promise was made to Abram. Genesis 12, I'll read from 1 through 3. Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred. Uh-oh. Go from your country and your kindred. Here's where we have a problem. When God starts to telling us, hey, release so you can receive. We don't want to release the relationship. We don't want to release the job. We don't want to release the money. We don't want to release this. We don't want to release the friends. We don't want to release. But see, Abram had to go first. Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I ain't even gonna tell you where it is. See, sometimes God say, I prepare for a husband. I ain't even gonna tell you who the husband is, though. He tell you, prepare for this or do this, but I ain't even gonna tell you what it is because I want you to just trust him. Verse 2, and I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. We're blessed to be a blessing. Let us understand another point. That when God blesses us, it is never for us to hold all unto ourselves. This is how many of us lose the very thing that God has blessed us with. You don't believe me? God tells us and warns us over in Deuteronomy 8 that when we get the thing that we have prayed for, when we get the thing that we have labored for, when we get the thing that we have said, Lord, please, 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 he said, don't forget me. Why? Because after deliverance comes development. We need them to keep it. We need them to keep the job. We need him to keep the position. We need him to keep the husband. We need him to keep the children under control. We need him to keep it. We need to know how to function in our purpose. We need him to keep the money. And we need him so that we're not serving the money. We need him to keep our mind. Okay, so we can't run off and leave God after he blesses us with those things. Verse 3, he says, I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you, I will curse. And in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Aren't we a part of all the families of the earth? So again, the promise is still being fulfilled, and Abram has been long gone from the earth because God keeps his word, right? So then we go into Genesis 26, where we move to Isaac's promise, because each one of them got a promise. God extended the promise to Isaac and his seed, that which includes Jacob, right? He says, and here's the specific reading, and there was a famine. I'm reading from Genesis 26, starting at 1, going down to 5. And there was a famine in the land beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, unto Gerar. And the Lord appeared unto him and said, go not down into Egypt. Dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and will bless thee. For unto thee and unto thy seed I will give all these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father. And I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and will give unto thy seed all these countries, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. There we go again with that. Because that Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my law. So because your daddy obeyed me, because your daddy obeyed my voice, because your daddy kept my charge, because your daddy kept my commandments, because your daddy kept my statutes, because your daddy kept my laws, I will bless you and your seed. Isn't that a promise to have? And so then we scroll on down to the 35th chapter of the same book, Genesis. God made a promise to Jacob and birthed the nation of Israel in Genesis 35. I'll start at verse 1. And God said unto Jacob, arise and go up to Bethel and dwell there and make there an altar unto God that appeared unto thee when thou fleddest from the face of Esau thy brother. Then Jacob said unto his household, listen to this. Then Jacob said unto his household and to all that were with him, put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean and change your garments. Put a pin in that. Verse 3. And let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make there an altar unto God, who answereth me in the days of my distress, and was with me in the day which I went. Verse 4. And they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand, and all their earrings which were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the oak which was by Shechem. Verse 5. And they journeyed, and the terror of God was upon the cities that were around them, and they did not pursue after the sons of Jacob. Why? Because it was a promise on them, remember? 6. So Jacob came to Luz, which is in the land of Canaan, that is Bethel, he and all the people that were with him. Verse 7. And he built there an altar and called the place El Bethel, because there God appeared unto him when he fled from the face of his brother. Verse 8. But Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried beneath Bethel under an oak, and the name of it was called Elon Bakuth. Verse 9. And God appeared unto Jacob again when he came out of Pandanaram, and blessed him. Verse 10. And God said unto him, thy name is Jacob. Thy name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be thy name. And he called his name Israel. So this is where the birth of the nation. It can't be a nation of Israel. It can't be no children of Israel if there is no Israel. So the promise of Israel was birthed in Genesis 12:2, but the actual Israel was birthed from Genesis 35. The fruition of 12:2 came in 35. You see how this is all pulling together. So he says, and this is verse 11. And God said unto him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, and kings shall come out of thy loins. Verse 12. And the land which I gave Abraham and Isaac, to thee I will give it, and to thy seed after thee will I give the land. Notice what had to happen, though. God had to change his name, because if you understand that over in chapter 27, Jacob and his mama did what? Stole a birthright. It was so much deceit and trickery that was on Jacob's hands. And God said, I got to change your name. Just like Abram, in order for him to get the promise, he had to go from Abram to Abraham, because it was too much on Abram. Abram done lied when he went into the city, telling me my sister. Abram done laughed, and they done laughed when God gave him the promise. It was too much on them. Sometimes God got to give us a name change. God give us a name change. Because what we're called matters. What we carry on our name matters. Sometimes the stains on our names matter. This is why we have to learn how to break curses that's on our bloodline, because that's on our name. And it matters. It matters. And so these are the promises, most of which were just build-ons from Abraham's promise, Abram's promise. Abram got the original promise, Isaac got an extension of that, Jacob got an extension of that, and every time the extension was greater and greater. And these are the promises on which God said, I must get them out of captivity and into the land that I promised their fathers I would give them, even though their fathers are gone. Okay? So in preparation for the promise, what happened? What happened? Okay, so we get to the end of Genesis. At the end of Genesis, Joseph dies. Okay, Joseph dies. And over the course of 300 years, the children of Israel have gone from being blessed and favored to being in the midst of brutal famine. I mean, they were in brutal famine. They went from brutal famine to slavery. And it was like, wow, 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 what happened? Whoa, wow. Because Joseph was favored. He was favored in Egypt. Remember, he was second in command. He was second in command. He was like, how? How? He was the man. Like, let's be clear. He was the man. He was the man with the plan. He knew how to interpret the dreams. Like, he was the man in Egypt. But he died. And over 300 years later, this Pharaoh here said, Joseph, who? I don't know him. I don't know him. And you got to understand, remember, there was already a big difference between, you know, the Egyptians and others in the way that they did things, right? Because we talked about that back in the series that we did with Joseph, that the Egyptians kind of ate differently, and so there was always already some little differences between the Egyptians and other people, that were from outside, foreigners. I'll say foreigners because everybody didn't necessarily per se come from Canaan per se. They came from, when there was a famine, they came from different surrounding areas. Why? Because they were trying to survive, right? They were trying to survive. And so this Pharaoh said, I don't know Joseph, and I don't care nothing about what he done. I don't care if these are his people or not. Pharaoh saw a way for him to benefit from the Israelites by enslaving them. So he enslaved them, partially out of insecurity, because they were great in number. Remember the promise? The promise was they were going to be great in number. So they became great and great and great in number. And he was like, wait a minute, because soon they're going to try to overthrow me. And so he's like, well, if I enslave them, then I can make money from them and I can assure that they will never try to overthrow me. Oh, okay. Now let us parallel this to this day and time. This is the same thing that's happening today. Same thing that's happening today. If I can enslave you, if I can get you hooked on Facebook all day, if I can feed you information and you never research for yourself, if I can tell you milk does your body good and put a whole bunch of billboards up, you'll think that what I'm saying is true. You'll never research for yourself. You'll never read for yourself. And if you do happen to read, I'll ban the people that will say certain things, and I'll make sure that their information doesn't get around. I'll control what you see. Isn't that slavery? But we have fun on Facebook, and don't get me wrong, Facebook is a tool. It's not evil. How we use it determines whether it's evil or not. But the point is, and it's not just Facebook and social media as a whole. How do we use it? But ultimately, if I can feed you, and we have to understand that we're fed information. Look at AI. AI is taking away our abilities. We're not paying attention that certain things are taking away our abilities. AI is taking our ability to write, right? It's taking away our ability to write, because now you go to AI, AI will write it for you, to speak it for you. So after a while, we won't speak, we won't write. We already don't write in cursive. So, okay, that's gone. Okay, and then we already don't tell time on our own. So that's gone. We got one device that takes pictures for us, so we don't have real pictures anymore. We're slowly but surely, we can't even function without our phones, right? We're slowly but surely allowing something to enslave us. A whole system is enslaving us a little by little, subtly. But the effect will seem like suddenly, but it's not. We see things and we see the convenience of it, but we don't understand the underlying inconvenience of a thing, right? We don't understand that if we allow AI to speak for us, if we allow texting to become our new language, that we will forget how to spell. And then if we forget how to spell and we already don't speak because we allow AI to speak for us and AI to write for us, and we use text language when we do write, we will lose our ability to write, to speak. We will lose our ability. And what happened? The slaves from back years ago couldn't write or speak, right? So it's just easing us back into that time. And we don't realize it because of the convenience and the instant gratification of the money that these things make us. Right? So it's parallel and right to exactly what this time was, because when people become too plentiful, we got to find a way to subdue them so that they don't overtake our system. And this is what the 3%, the 3% that are at the top, think about the 97%, they will overthrow us. And so we most definitely have to find a way to subdue them, find a way to keep them under control. Okay. And so Pharaoh enslaved the Israelites. But because of the promise, the more they were oppressed, the more they were blessed. It was on their life. The promises had been made. Whether they were in slavery or not, they were going to be blessed. And the Egyptians despised them, and they were even harder on them. So as slaves, they were even harder on them, because how dare you be blessed? Like, even their physical dexterity was blessed. Their bodies were made for labor. So they executed well. And the Egyptians despised them because look at how they built. Look at it. We can't even do half of the work that they do. We can't even do what they do. So they had to keep them mentally oppressed, for sure. And they beat them too. And so what happened next? Pharaoh resorted to what? Population control. Don't that sound like COVID? Population control. We'll figure out a way to kill some of them then. Because if we can't work them to death, we work them and they become more plentiful. Okay, well, we got to do something. He resorted to population control. So he told them to start killing the baby's birth. Start killing the firstborns, the firstborn sons. Start killing them. I want to tell you exactly where we are in in Exodus. Because I just start talking, okay? And I want to tell you exactly where we are in Exodus in this part. So it says, where are we? Pardon me. So we're in the first chapter of Exodus now, okay? First chapter of Exodus, somewhere around the 15th verse. It says, Pharaoh decided to use even more wicked methods of population control. He told the Hebrew midwives to kill any son that a Hebrew woman delivered. Any one of them. That was verses 15 and 16. Kill any one of them. But the midwives said, we're not doing that. Because what? They feared God. They feared God. Even though Pharaoh had the right to kill them, they was like, They knew God was the ultimate. So they were like, no, we're not killing them. But this was all a part of God's plan anyway. And so after after King got word that they were, they didn't follow his command, he demanded an explanation, and they lied. They said, well, they kept, arriving when the births had already happened. They were like, when we got there, it's too late. It's too late. Because they were like, we rather lie to the king than, because they felt like he don't deserve the truth. He killing all these kids. But they like, we would rather lie to the king and save the children, innocent children, as opposed to telling him we ain't do it and get killed or killing these babies. And for their actions, God was good to the midwives and gave them families. That's verses 20 and 21. And the Israelites did what? Multiplied even more. Why? Because there was a promise. There was a promise. Okay? There was a promise. And even though these women were faced with two sinful consequences, lie or murder, they chose the one that brought God the greatest glory. They were like, well, we ain't finna kill these babies. We just not gonna do it. Okay? And so what did he do? Pharaoh did it again. He trying to control the numbers and the narrative again. So he commanded all his people to throw every son born to the Hebrews into the Nile. He like, nah, I ain't got to worry about you arriving late. So throw them in the river. Now with this decree, here we come with Moses, right? Here we come with Moses, because now we finna see what happens with Moses coming on the scene. Okay, the rise of Moses. God had blessed his people. Okay, this is a problem. Why? Because the more he blessed them, the more they grew. The more they grew, the more, Pharaoh was really ticked off because he felt like they were going to overthrow him. Okay, but this led to worse and worse problems for them, right? And this also led to the preparation of the promise being fulfilled, though. God's ultimate deliverance. Okay, and so this is a reminder that many times God allows blessings, right? He allows blessings in our lives. And once his word goes forward, His word went forward. This is what it's going to be. And the blessing is on our lives. But even though it seemed like it caused a problem, no, it didn't. It actually led to the ultimate, the ultimate deliverance and the ultimate promise being fulfilled. Okay. So when we get to chapter 2, verses 1 through 4, a woman from the family of Levi had a son. She saw that he was beautiful. And so she said, I'm going to have my baby. I'm not, nope, I'm going to have my baby. And she decided to do what? Trust God. She was like, I'm going to trust God over the power of this Pharaoh. I'm going to trust God. But after a while, she couldn't hide him no longer. She couldn't continue to hide him. Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put that twice. But she couldn't continue to hide the baby. So she said, you know what? I'm going to have to just take a chance. I'm going to take a chance. And so she placed her son, which was Moses, in a basket in the Nile River. And she prayed for the providence of God. You know, God, please. I just put my baby in a river. Okay. I just put my baby in a river. And they were being drowned. Okay. They were being drowned. But she said, please, God. And the baby boy's sister, with whom we know as Miriam, watched to see what God would do. She watched him. She wanted to see what was going to happen with her brother. And so she watched him from afar. When we get down to the next couple of verses, Pharaoh's daughter came to bathe. Isn't that something? How God sends a ram in the bush. Okay. He sends somebody who just happens to be, oh, let me go take a bath. She thought the bath was her idea. Let me tell you something. Sometimes we will think something is our idea, and the whole time it's all a part of God's plan. You thought you just got up and went to the store. But no, that's not true. God sent you to the store, right? We'll think something is our idea, and God is so gracious, he'll let you think it was your idea too. Go ahead, girl. Go and take your bath, right? And so she got up, oh, let me go and bathe. And she found the basket with the Hebrew baby inside and felt sorry for him. Again, intervention. Despite the decree, intervention. Despite what was going on around him, intervention. Despite what was said that was supposed to happen over his life, intervention. Why? His plan. Okay. So Moses' sister then offered to find a Hebrew mother to nurse the boy. I'll help you find someone. And Pharaoh's daughter said, okay. You see how the plot just unravels. Okay. One moment the baby was under the threat of death, and the next moment the mother was being paid by Pharaoh's daughter to raise him. His mother was being paid by Pharaoh's daughter to raise him. So, move to verse 10. We'll skip down to 10. When the boy grew older, so when Moses grew older, the mother brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. Now, that had to be hard, right? Because now you handing your baby over, and all this time she that was your child. But then she named him Moses, okay? And an Israelite child who was supposed to have been executed under royal orders was now being raised in the royal household. Wow. Wow. He was supposed to be executed from the same, he was living in the same place that sent down the execution that was supposed to happen. But he ended up living in that place, being raised by the very daughter of the person that sought to execute him. That's how God can do things. The very enemies that don't even know they're your enemies will bless you. All a part of God's plan. So, looking at verse 11 and through 15, I'm just kind of giving a synopsis. So I'm not going word for word. You can read that yourself. That's what we're going to be doing, is reading it ourselves. Moses grew up. He observed the oppression of his own people. So he always knew who he was, right? He knew who he was, and so he started to see the oppression of his own people. And so, he decided to identify with his people and help them. And one day when he noticed an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, he got angry and he killed the Egyptian and hid his body. But the next day, when he tried to break up a fight between two Hebrews, one of them said, "Who made you a judge over us?" And they rejected Moses' attempts at peacemaking and deliverance. He assumed his people would understand that God would give them deliverance through him, but they didn't. And so Moses had miscalculated. Then the Hebrew asked Moses, "You plan to kill me like you killed the Egyptian?" Moses thought that nobody know. It's always somebody watching us. It's always somebody watching us or somebody that sees, even if it's just God that sees, the Holy Spirit that sees, and the Holy Spirit will tell somebody else so they'll know. I've heard of several people that say that they've gone to church and somebody told the pastor their business. It was the Holy Spirit. Sometimes it wasn't a person that told the God your business. It wasn't your family member that told them your business. Sometimes it was the very Spirit of God that told that person your business because you needed to hear what was coming down from heaven. Okay? So Moses had grown up. He done killed this Egyptian, and he realized somebody saw him. He became afraid when he realized that, they're going to know that I'm not with them, that I'm not for them. And so when Pharaoh finally caught wind of things, he tried to kill Moses. And Moses had to then run for his life, and he fled to Midian. But understand that even that was a part of the plan. Even though Moses was a murderer, that was still a part of the plan. Okay, even that was used because God will use things to get us to where we need to be. Now, let me give you some major points. Point number one, God keeps his promise even when the other party doesn't. So even when the other party doesn't, how many times, okay, and this is a rhetorical question because I just don't even think we would know, okay? But how many times did Abram do something that God could have said, I'm done with you, okay? How many times did he not believe? How many times did they laugh? How many times did Abram lie? How many times did he do something that God was like, I didn't tell you to do that. As a matter of fact, I told you the opposite. But God didn't ever negate the promise. Isaac wasn't the firstborn. Ishmael was. But God still honored Isaac as the birthright, as the one who would get the promise, right? How many times did Jacob, oh my gosh, how many times did Jacob do something that God could have very well said, that's it, that's it, that's it, that's it, that's it, that's it, that's it. No promise for you. But God still, even after they were gone, honored his word to them. Now, that doesn't mean that we have a right to go out here and live filthy, funky, and foul and do what we want to do. No, it doesn't. But if God gives us a promise, he says, I keep my word. And when I gave you my word, I factored all of that in. But your heart, you still, you still want to be careful because look at some of the things they went through, even in the midst of trying to getting these promises. Even though they fulfilled the promise, they still had to go through some things because of the condition of their heart. Look at Jacob, for instance. Jacob had to work 14 years when the custom said he only needed to work 7. No, he had to work 14 years to get the woman. Why? He was deceived. Why was he deceived? Because he deceived other people. He was deceived by Laban, just like he deceived his brother. So he had to reap what he sowed. Look at the lineage of Jacob. Even though it was all a part of the plan for them to throw Joseph away and for Joseph to go into slavery, ultimately, where did a lot of their bitterness come from? It came from Jacob. It came from Jacob and how he handled things. So understand that just because God gives us a promise does not mean that he gives us a license to do what we want to do, because in the midst of that license, even when God says, I'll still honor my promise, but I will still avenge, I will still deal with your sin. I will deal with your heart. But God keeps his promise even when the other party does not. Another point that I want to bring about is that God always has a remnant that fears God more than man. Always. Always. If you look at the story, look at the story. We talked about Jezebel. Look at the story of Jezebel. What happened? It was one, Elijah, that was like, Now don't get me wrong, there were others that were hidden in the cave, but when it came to the showdown, Elijah was by himself. There is always one or more, but at least one that fears God more than man, and that's willing to say, nope, I'm gonna follow God. Nope, I'm gonna follow God. Look at Daniel. Nope, I'm not eating the king's meat. I'm gonna follow God. Nope, I'm gonna follow God. He always has somebody that he raises up that fears God more than man. And in this instance of what we're talking about, it was the midwives. The midwives said, nope, we're not doing that. Nope, we're not doing that. God will use even his own. When Saul hated David so much, Saul gave his daughter. I was listening to a sermon the other day, and he said, and the girl said Saul gave his daughter to David to try to trip him up, and she loved David instead. She fell in love with him and warned David that her daddy was trying to kill him. So let me let you down out this window. Saul's son, they love David. So even when the ones that belong to the enemy's camp, he will still make one of them love you. He always got one that he gonna fit that fears him, and one that he's gonna get his job done, his plan done through. So there's always a remnant that fears God more than man, and it is our job to try to be a part of that remnant, especially in this day and time when people cave for money. Another thing is God uses any means to get the proper parties in place to execute his plan. Understand that Moses thought all was lost because, oh shoot, they realized I done killed. They realize I done killed this Egyptian. They know I'm not with them. They know I'm not one of them. Let me flee. Let me flee. Let me get out of here. And God like, yeah, you can leave for a little bit, but I'm gonna send you back, right? I'm gonna say, don't worry about it. You know what I'm saying? Don't worry about it. I'm gonna send you back. Because God is like, I'm gonna get you to where you need to be. A very good example of this is Joseph. I'm gonna get you to where you need to be. Joseph went to check on his brothers, ended up in a pit. From the pit was sold into slavery to his cousins. The cousins sold him to the Potiphar, and he was in Potiphar's house at the palace. Went from the palace to the prison because the Potiphar's wife had a lustful spirit on her and wanted David, and David wanted Joseph, and Joseph was like, no ma'am, I will not do this to God. Went to the prison, interpreted the dreams, the cupbearer, and I think it was the butcher. I always mix them up. I think the cupbearer went. Who was it that got killed? One of them got killed. Don't quote me, y'all. But went up to one of them was killed. I think one of them was killed. The baker, the cupbearer. One of them was killed, and one of them went back to the palace. Went back to the palace, and he forgot for 2 years. He forgot because Joseph said, "Just remember me, man. Just remember me." And he forgot Joseph for 2 years. And when Pharaoh started having dreams, And he said, I need somebody to interpret these dreams. I'm dreaming about fat cows and skinny cows. I need somebody to tell me about these cows and what this stuff means. He said, oh man, I think it was the cupbearer. Said, oh man, I forgot to tell you about Joseph. Joseph know all about how to interpret dreams, because see, they had tried everybody and nobody could interpret the dreams, not gestures, not magicians. Nobody could interpret the dreams. And so he was like, oh man, I forgot to tell you about him. I forgot to tell you about that. The king, Pharaoh had a dream that he couldn't figure out. I'm looking it up now because it's going to bother me if I don't, to know which one was it. Was it the cupbearer or what? It was the cupbearer. I knew okay. So what happened was the chief baker got hanged. He was hanged. And the cupbearer was restored. but he interpreted both of their dreams, okay? And so the cupbearer was supposed to remember Joseph, but he didn't for 2 years. So for 2 years, Joseph was left in the jail. But even though people will leave us and forget us, God won't. God made there be a reason for Joseph to be on the scene. Why? Because his plan needed to unveil and prevail. And so when Joseph went to the king, washed himself up, presented himself, told the king, this is what your dream means. And this is how you're going to fix it. And the king said, outside of me, nobody will rule over you. Do what you need to do. And Joseph became the man in Egypt outside of Pharaoh. Okay? But God did what? He moved Joseph right on along to get to that palace. He moved him right on along to get to that palace. He said, I don't care what's going on. He gonna get to that palace at the appointed time. He gonna get there. Because I can't let Jacob and his seeds starve to death back in Canaan because of the promise that I made to the daddy and the granddad. So Joseph got to go before them, but he gonna get to where he need to go by any means necessary. By any means necessary. And last but not least, God makes provisions for his plans. God pays for what he orders, because as we're going to delve into next week, what happened? Moses was like, when God came to him and told him, listen, so I need you to do something for me. He was looking like, you want me? You sure? I don't want to do that. And he started telling God all the reasons why he couldn't. I stutter. How am I going to lead the people? He gave him all these excuses. God said, go get Aaron. He could talk. Don't worry about it. God has something for all his excuses. Don't worry about it. Because God pays for what he orders. But here's the thing. We got to make sure he ordered it. We got to make sure God ordered it. Because God ain't ordering some of this stuff out here. We want God to bless marriages that God ain't put together. God said, I ain't got nothing to do with that. I pay for what I order. I don't have to pay for your order. Now, he is sovereign. He can reign on the just and the unjust. He can, but he don't have to. See, when he make an order, he got to pay for that, because that's what he ordered. But he don't have to pay for your order. You went pick that man, like when I married the counterfeit. When I married the counterfeit, he said, I ain't got nothing to do with that. That's what you picked. That's what you did. When we go and use our own energy to go get a job, when we backstab people and we go use our own energy to do stuff, that's on you. But when it's God's plan, he will make provisions for his plan. I'll never forget the day when I was attending the church, and God, that morning, I had got up and I put on my stockings. And as I was putting on my stockings, God said to me, he said, Sunday school. I said, okay, what does this mean? He said, Sunday school. I said, okay. When I got to church, the pastor said, I want to speak to you after church. I said, yes, sir. He said, I want to know how you feel about teaching. I said, Sunday school? He said, yeah, how'd you know? I said, God whispered it to me when I was putting on my stockings this morning. He said, okay, so what you think about it? I said, oh, God already told me to do it. So it was a non-negotiable. Like when God said Sunday school, that's what it was going to be, right? So it ain't whether I want to or not. It's okay, I'm doing it. When am I starting? That was what I wanted to know. So he said to me, well, do you need a book? I said, no. He said, well, what you going to do? I said, listen, if God called me to teach Sunday school, God gonna tell me what to say in Sunday school. And I taught Sunday school for 2.5 years, never used a book. And guess what? Every single year, Sunday school numbers increased. People would come to Sunday school, not because of me, but because of the word that was coming forth. People would come to me and say, I missed Sunday school this morning. Can I please have your notes? Because I don't want to be behind next week. Hear me clearly. God pays for what he orders. But he ain't got to pay for your order. So this is why we have to make sure that we bathe a thing in prayer, that we fast over it to make sure, God, is this your will, your way, your word? We have to get a word from God before we just go out here willy-nilly doing the thing. What are you saying, God? But many times we don't pray because we're scared He's going to say no. But let me tell you something. Thank God for maturity, because if I pray and He says no, thank you for not allowing me to connect to a counterfeit thing, a counterfeit person, a counterfeit job, a counterfeit friendship. Thank you. Because God is not responsible for paying for, providing protection for. He's not providing for, not required to help you develop through. He ain't required to do none of that if you pick something yourself. But there is something amazing that happens when we connect to that which is the will of God. Amazing. You hear me? When you find your purpose and you begin to walk therein, there is such a refreshing that when it's something that's not your purpose, it becomes hard to do. When God revealed that my purpose was speaking and teaching and coaching, anything related to speaking, it was a struggle for me to go back to my job. Because I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to do the thing that I was created to do, because it was liberating, like somebody had took a key and just opened me up and I could just flow. I could just flow. When we connect to the man or woman that God has designed for us to be in purpose with, there is a flow. There's a connection that you can't explain. There's a love that you can't explain, something that's not tainted by God, by earth, it's something that's, it's like a God's hand is on it. It is such a beautiful love story. But we won't wait for it. And I'm telling you, I'm here to tell you that waiting is hard. Wait comes with weight. But on the other side of the weight is something that you can't even put into words, because it only comes from God. Only the hand of God could have done this. Only the hand of God could have blessed me this way. Only the love of God could be shared between two people this way. God pays for what He orders. And it is only our job to find out what He's ordering and get underneath that. Okay? And so I'm going to stop the recording here. Please make sure that you read everything that I told you, all the Genesis. Please read those for yourself so that you know it for yourself. But also read Exodus 1 through 4. Chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4 in their entirety. If you need to, do a little research on it, because we're going to come back and we're going to finish out the preparation, okay? So I'll come back, I'll do a quick recap, Lord's will, next week, and then we'll go further with, the preparation. And we may even, finish in time to get into the next part, which is confrontation. So if we do finish in time to get into a little bit of that, we'll start with the confrontation as well, okay? So if you want to read into Exodus 5, you can start with chapter 5 if you have time as well, all right? I hope this was very helpful to you. I'm going to stop the recording for prayer, and Lord's will, see you next week or next session.